Welcome back, boys and girls, to your video on subtracting integers. Your goal now is that you can subtract integers. So, we learned the other day how to add integers, and now I'm wondering, using a number line, if you are able to write a subtraction expression to represent this here. So if you remember from adding, and you can take a minute to think about it, pause if you don't want me to give it away, you want to challenge your brain, which is a good thing to do. We learned that, usually when you're adding, you start at 0, move the direction, and then move the direction that you want. So similar, we're going to kind of look at that. You might think of that if you think about your adding situation. We're at 0, so the first movement we did from 0 was 6. And then notice if it was adding, the second number in blue there is -7. So that would be an addition thing. What would that look like as subtraction is the question. Noticing we ended up at -1. Okay? So trying to think about how would I make this a subtraction question. And so what I think of is the first number is moving right. Since the second number is moving left and subtracting is a taking away, really I think of this as 6, and then I move left 7, a +7. And notice you're going to end up with the same thing. So these are really two ways to write the same question. 6 minus 7 is equal to -1. 6 plus a -7 is also equal to -1. So notice the second number is opposite, a positive then a negative, but we have the same result of -1. Okay? So the key thing that you need to write down in your notes is that when you subtract integers, all you're really doing is adding the opposite. That's it. That's what we're doing today is we are going to keep the first number, we are going to change subtraction to addition, and we are going to change the second number to its opposite. So essentially we are just going to add the opposite. Make sure you have that written down. Add the opposite. Add the opposite. So 2 examples here. If we were going to take 9 away from 4, that's really saying we're going to add a -9. 7 minus a -10 is really adding 10. What I always think about is if I'm taking away a positive. So in this example, 4 minus 9. If I'm taking away a positive, my answer should be going down. If I take away the number of hours I exercise a week, I'm going to be doing less well. Whereas if I'm taking away a positive, which are taking away a negative, over here, taking away a negative, my results should be going up. If I take away how much candy I eat, I'll be feeling better. So kind of be thinking about that as you can make estimations and predictions when you're looking before you find the difference or sum. So let's work on subtracting positive integers. So if we have 8 and we're going to take away 13, again, always try to give yourself, if you're not sure, try to give yourself a situation to help you. So if I have 8 of something and I owe someone 13, that's taking away 13, what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to say I'm going to add the opposite. So then I can see, just going back to adding, I have more negatives than positives, so my sum will be negative. And then I say, how many more is 13 than 8? And I get a remainder of 5. So if I have 8 and I'm giving someone 13, well, I don't have enough to give them, so I'm going to owe them 5 remaining. -10 minus 7. I'm going to add the opposite. Now notice I have a negative and a negative, so my sum will be negative. 10 plus 7 is 17. So remember those rules, having them written down. That blue sheet that I gave you a while ago, that will be helpful as well. Please give these a try. Do your best. Don't get frustrated. Try to think reasonably about your answers. Notice I have 6 minus 12. Well, I already know 12 is more than 6, so I can predict that I don't have enough to give away, so I'm going to owe. So when I have 6 minus 12, I think about that as adding the opposite, and I see that I have more negatives, just like I thought, and 12 is 6 more than 6, so I'm going to still owe 6. So -20 minus 15. Add the opposite. Two negatives, keep the sign. Add the absolute value. 20 and 15 is 35. Negative 35. Negative 22 minus 26. I'm going to add the opposite. Notice how I keep repeating that. A negative and a negative. I'm just getting more negative. 22 plus a negative 26 is going to be a negative 48. Okay, so now taking a negative integer away. So you'll notice on the other slide that when we took away a positive, all our answers went down from the original. Now you're going to notice that when we take away a negative, we're actually going to be going up from the original number. So now I have a 1 minus a negative 2. Those parentheses are there just to separate the negative and the subtraction sign. I'm going to add the opposite. Taking away a negative is a good thing. So I get 1 minus a negative 2 is positive 3. Negative 10 minus negative 7. Taking away a negative is a good thing. So I'm going to be going up on the number line from negative 10. I still have more negatives than positives. 10 minus 7 is 3. Negative 3. Give these a try. Taking away a negative is a good thing. Positive plus a positive is a positive. Taking away a negative, remember, is a good thing. So I should be going up. Still have more negatives than positives. 15 is 10 more than 5. 18, taking away a negative 6. Add the opposite. 18 plus 6 for 24. So now back to another familiar piece from a previous unit is evaluating the expression. So a little bit of algebra when we're given a value of a variable, plugging it in and solving. So for example, if we're asked to evaluate or solve for x minus y, if we're given the value of x and y, you simply write what you're given, plug in what is known, leaving the operation there. So notice that subtraction sign is staying there and the negative sign is being added. You don't replace it. That part stays there. So then you are going to add the opposite. And I have more negatives than positives. 6 is 1 more than 5. So the biggest part is remembering to bring down that subtraction sign and not replacing the negative with it. So try these. Your turn. And then check. Evaluate each expression if A is 5, B is negative 8, and C is negative 9. So for B, I plug in B's value. I add the opposite. 2 negatives, I'm getting more negative. 8 plus 10, negative 18. A minus B, so 5 minus, notice I keep the subtraction sign, and plug in 4B, the negative 8. Very important. Then I add the opposite. Now it's 2 positives added together for 13. Another one, C, which is negative 9, minus, keeping that, a positive 5, and adding the opposite. 2 negatives now, keep the negative, 9 plus 5, 14, so negative 14. All right, last little bit here, some word problems, just to make sure you understand that you can't just write them in the order that maybe you see them, but what the question asks. So for space, the temperature on the moon varies from negative 173 degrees Celsius to 127 degrees Celsius. Find the difference, which means subtraction, between the maximum and the minimum. So max minus the minimum. So if we know our number line, we know that numbers that are positive are greater than numbers that are negative. So we're finding the difference between 127 minus a negative 173. So again, if you think about it on a thermometer, we're going to have 0 here, 127 up here, and negative 173. So we're looking for the difference from there to there, in addition to the difference from there to there, which makes sense as to why it's adding the opposite. So when I get that, I get 300. So there's a 300-degree difference between the max and the min. So try this one. The Dead Sea's deepest part is 799 meters below sea level. The plateau to the east of the Dead Sea rises about 1,340 meters above sea level. What is the difference between the top of the plateau and the deepest part? So again, I'm not writing this in the order they said it. I'm writing it in the order the question is. So the top minus the bottom, the deepest. Notice I'm minusing a negative. For distances, you're generally looking for a positive number. Add the opposite. So I'm really adding these numbers together. For 2,139 meters is the difference between the top and the bottom. Remembering that 0 is in the middle. So you are finding the distance from here to here and the distance from here to here. So just another spot if you're someone who really likes steps and just having those written down. Here's some key concepts for subtracting. Some of you might hear this as keep, change, flip. We'll talk about that as well. Keep the first number and leave it alone. Change subtraction to addition. And then flip the second number to its opposite. So that's also, we've heard that with fractions. We can hear it now. And then you'll use addition rules. And some of you might say, if you have 2 minus a negative 3, you can call that chop chop. Or if you have 4 minus 10, you can think about that as chop minus. Okay? Different ways to help you out. Write down what you need. We'll see you soon. Rewatch, rewrite, ask questions. You're great.